virtual meetup. The discussion for today is the research survey, State of Cybersecurity Professional Careers, and the results that were released jointly by the Enterprise Strategy Group, ESG, and ISSA. The results have been received with a good amount of coverage from the media, from publications such as Security Magazine, Info Security Magazine, eWeek, Business Wire, just to name a few. This is Candy Alexander. I'm your host for today's meetup. I am the chair of the Cybersecurity Career Lifecycle for ISSA. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind folks that you are able to ask questions through the webinar box, and we'll handle those as they come in. Also, please feel free to use the hashtag ISSACSCL to tweet about today's meetup. Now, if we could get started, I'd like to introduce to you our guest for today. His name is John Olsick. He is a senior principal analyst at ESG and who had actually performed much of the work. So, John, welcome.
Thank you, Candy. Nice to be here. So we can move on to the next slide, please. Let's start by talking about some background, how we got to doing this project. So the genesis of this project was really Candy and I, when we've known each other for years, discussing sort of where each organization was in a couple of topics. So, for example, here at ESG, we've done research on the cybersecurity skills shortage for a number of years, pretty much going back to 2011. It's been a pet issue of mine. I talked about it at RSA. I've written a lot about it. In fact, the statistic you may have seen that's been published a lot this year is that in our global IT research, which included cybersecurity, 46% of organizations said that they have a problematic shortage of IT security skills. And we've published lots of research on this, so have others, but really the research has been around the shortage in the workforce. So we don't have enough people to fill the jobs that are out there. But that really doesn't speak to, well, what are the implications of this skills shortage on the people who are working as cybersecurity professionals and their organizations? So what's going on? What are the ramifications here? So I brought this quandary to Candy, and it really worked alongside the notion of, well, how are people advancing their careers? And are they advancing their careers in a positive and progressive way, given the fact that there's so many demands on them? So thinking about combining our efforts into a collaborative report. And this is the first fruition. This is the fruition of that effort. We do plan on publishing a second part to this. So this is really about people's attitudes toward their careers, their skills, their training, their organizations, and how they're managing their skills development, their career development. The second part will be cybersecurity professionals' opinions about threats, about their organizations, and about cybersecurity at large and its impact on society. So the research project objectives, we wanted to look at the skills shortage out there. We wanted to look at changes in business IT and the threat landscape, and we wanted to understand how those are impacting cybersecurity career paths and options. The methodology, we started by interviewing between 5 and 10 CISOs to get their impressions on what was going on in their organizations and in the industry at large. That helped shape our survey. And the survey consisted of about 40 questions to a global panel of, and it turned out to be 437 cybersecurity professionals. Now, with 437 respondents, the margin of error is plus or minus 4.59%. Just a few more statistics there. 95% of respondents were ISSA members. So we got a very good, highly skilled bunch of respondents here, which was very important to us. 31% were CISOs, VP level or director level. 49% were cybersecurity administrators, staff, or managers, and 20% classified as others. So those tended to be people who had some cybersecurity responsibility but couldn't equate to one of the job titles that we listed, which Candy will expound upon, by the way, because there is no consistency in cybersecurity job titles. So if we go on to the next slide, we wanted to understand, why do people become cybersecurity professionals to begin with? And what we found were basically three things. And there's a lot of data behind this, by the way. Please download the report. It's available on the ESG site. It's available on the ISSA site. We'd love to get your feedback. This is an annual project, and we'd love to continually improve the process and the questions and the data that we get out of this. So please give us your feedback and read the report. If you like it, tweet about it. We want to promote this as broadly as we can for the good of the cybersecurity professional community. So back to the data. The reasons why people become cybersecurity professions, there are three basic things. 27% said it was a chance to use my technology skills to protect valuable IT and business assets. And later on down, which is not represented here, 22% said that they were attracted by the morality of the profession. So this is really good guys versus bad guys. Oh, 25%, it is listed there, I'm sorry. So it's the morality of the profession, good guys versus bad guys. 27% said it was a natural career move from an IT job. Now, I should also emphasize that 78% of those we surveyed moved to cybersecurity from IT. So it's a natural move, and that's good, and we can attract people from IT to cybersecurity, but we also have to do a better job of attracting others. And I'd say that we're not as far along on that front as we could be. It's one of the conclusions here. And then 25% said, I've been working or playing with various technologies for a long time, so a cybersecurity career was seemed like a way to continue to do so. So this is the traditional tinkerer or hacker in the good sense of the word. So someone who likes taking apart technology, likes figuring out how technology works, and looks at cybersecurity as a way to not only understand those things, but also to figure out how to protect technologies. So Candy, what were your takeaways here?
Pretty similar. I mean, again, at the end of the day, whenever you talk to information security folks that are really passionate about it, ultimately ask them, why do you do it? And it kind of comes back to that little quote that was in the popular show, Mr. Robot, I just wanted to save the world. So I think that most certainly is why a lot of us are in it. When we looked at the full data, the full responses that come back, third from the bottom was the money, the financial opportunities associated with the profession. That was third from the bottom. So I think that's kind of ironic that most of us aren't in it to get rich. We're in it to do good and make the world a better place. Kind of idealistic, but it really speaks to who we are as a profession. And it also, it just hit me as well, it may be an interesting trait or characteristic of those coming in. And perhaps that's why we're not seeing a whole lot of people come into this profession because they don't necessarily, have that tendency.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we'll talk a little bit about money later, but I don't think, broadly, I don't think people understand that you can make a very, very good living as a cybersecurity professional. They just haven't put those things together.
Right.
So if we go on to the next slide, here's where we start to see some of the issues uncovered by this research. So go ahead. Okay, thank you. So as you saw from the last slide, we start with extremely motivated cybersecurity professionals who come into the industry, and there are clearly a lot of jobs, so people can find jobs. But once they are, we wanted to know if they have a well-defined career path and plan to get to the next level. You can see that just over a third said, yes, I believe I have a well-defined career path and plan to get to the next level. So that means just under two-thirds are struggling. So you see 42% say somewhat, and 23% say, no, I don't believe I have a well-defined career path and plan to get to the next level. Now, the more senior you are, the more likely you are to have a well-defined career path, which is certainly logical, but it means that people who get into this at a junior level struggle. And, well, why is that? Well, for one thing, they tend to be overwhelmed. For another thing, they're not really educated on what their career path could be. They could go on a business route, on a compliance route, on a legal route, and on a technical route. And they're not sure of which way to go, or they're not educated as to what their options are. And also consistent in this research, employers and so organizations at large, but also CISOs and senior security people aren't providing the right level of career development, career guidance, and support to their employees. And this is a red flag to me. It means that we're really not growing people to become the next generation of CISOs or to help them manage their careers properly. And there's certainly going to be some satisfaction issues and some burnout associated with that. Now, Candy, this is your area of expertise. What was your takeaway?
So I think this is indicative of the fact that the cybersecurity or information security careers, or the profession, I should say, it really is a reactive profession. And for those of you who have heard me talk before, it comes down to the understanding that when our profession was born, it was born out of necessity. Somebody broke into the environment, and the IT managers said, "Go figure it out." So there was the birth of the cybersecurity professional. Again, very reactive. From there, we had forensics born in that they had to figure it out and pull together how it happened. From there, it came down to compliance. Specialists. So again, our profession has morphed based on need within the environment and the business. So there's really not been any clear-cut path as to, okay, you start out as an information security analyst, and then you go here, and then you go up the chain of your career path. That's not ever been defined. Recently, the ISSA, as we all know, has attempted to do this with the cybersecurity career life cycle, and there's been other organizations attempting to do the same thing, such as the initiative from NICE, from the federal government, or better yet, the NICS program, that will define, different jobs and what they mean and what the KSAs are involved with them. But it's not a collaborative cooperative event from international representation. So it's kind of like, okay, the ISSA has one set of career paths, U.S. federal government has NICS, NICE, that is another. What we need, in my opinion, is we really need to have an internationally accepted career path. So you start off as this, you can go into that, line, specialty, and this, and so on and so forth. It has to be laid out, and it has to be, again, something that everyone internationally has a contribution into. So I think that, that's something that I would hope that would have occur within the next, say, like 5 years. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So when you go to get a job as an information security analyst here in the States, it's the same job over in Europe or over in Japan. How wonderful that would be.
I totally agree, Candy, and we don't see that now. So the career path, that makes the career path that much more diverse and difficult to manage.
Right.
If we go on to the next slide. So as a cybersecurity professional, you are in a cat and mouse game against some, as we've seen, sophisticated cyber adversaries. And they're continually developing their tactics, techniques, and procedures, their TTPs. And so it's incumbent upon the cybersecurity community to continue to develop their skill sets. And we wanted to know how people, or what's most effective for increasing your knowledge, skills, and abilities, your KSAs. These were the top 3 things that came out. So how do you improve your KSAs and your abilities as a cybersecurity professional? So the number 1 answer was attending specific cybersecurity training courses, so 58%. And the key word there is specific. So it's specific, it's hands-on, it's emulating real-world activity. You're working with other people, you're working in real-world scenarios, so think red teaming and things like this, where you're learning on the fly, where you're learning by doing. Secondarily, people talked about participating in professional organizations. So this is kind of birds of a feather or networking, but understand meeting other people particularly in your industry who have lived the same kind of challenges that you have and that you can share some empathy with and learn from. Then you see that there's a pretty big drop-off, but very similar to that. 37% talked about on-the-job mentoring from a cybersecurity professional who's more experienced than I am. Again, there was a distinction there where junior people really, really like that. They want to work at an organization where they feel like they can learn from some very experienced people who also have a stake in the game in a mentoring program, and often in many cases, to help train them along the way. Candy, what was your thoughts on this?
So I think, it's been really interesting to see the information come out from our members as well as other information security folks. And I think this is a really telling slide or telling data in that when we look at how we need to obtain the KSAs, we're all feeling the need to get really specific training. So I think this also supports one of the messages that we've been pushing through the cybersecurity career lifecycle, being that as technologists, we have to learn about the lightning speed technology that comes out. And so therefore, we're always trying to catch up with that. And so with that in mind, being IT security folks, we need laser beam training and knowledge specific to that topic, if you will. So I think that it's interesting that folks feel that obtaining the KSAs necessary is through that hands-on training. I mean, of course. And then participating in professional organizations, I think that, that's one of the benefits of the ISSA is that you get that networking opportunity, both from the chapter level as well as from, going to the international conference. It's again, I tongue-in-cheek call it, group therapy, but it is. I mean, who else understands the problems that we go through in our jobs except for, folks that do the same type of thing? And then, of course, on-the-job mentoring and training. This is something that the ISSA has recently introduced with a pilot program for formalized mentoring program. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check out the programs we have in that area. I'd like to, at this time, John, read you a question that we had come in from our audience, and I'm going to read it verbatim. If someone has been a software developer for embedded systems such as multi-service routers, IP protocols, etc., how to move into this field, and can we differentiate between these and regular IT people? So I'll take a stab at it. Maybe you can share your thoughts, John. So I think one of the things that we haven't really touched on as well is the transferable skills from like IT into information security. I think one of the things that we're lacking as a profession is to identify what those transferable skills are. When you look at the data that we've had presented, John stated that most of us come from IT, but there's a good reason, because our profession is built on technology. But we need to be better able to articulate what those specific transferable skills are. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a couple of avenues that come to mind. One is there's a lot of need for people who understand software security, and that goes from the secure software development lifecycle to designing and project managing software projects from a security perspective to the testing of software products. And that's sort of the other angle is there's probably a very good opportunity for not only software but just general penetration testing with that level of knowledge. You've heard of black box testing or fuzz testing, which is generally throwing protocols and traffic and attacks at different technologies that normally may be outside of the scope of something you would even plan for in the design of those. And I think your skill set really has some good alignment with that type of thought process and those types of skills.
Very good. I agree. So I hope that answers your question, participant. And I think that takes care of that. So, John?
Yeah, and if you have other questions, feel free to email me offline. Go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the things that was not listed, and hopefully people noticed this, when we asked about KSAs in the last slide we presented, just given the industry messaging, you would think that certifications would be one of the ways that people talk about improving their KSAs. In fact, it did come in, but it came in at a much lower rate. In fact, it was just over a third of people said certifications, but certainly lower than the top choices. We asked a lot of questions, and again, I'd encourage you to download this report, but we wanted to understand the value of certification. So what you see here in a very, very data heavy chart here are really two questions. We asked people, and these were only the people who had some type of security certification. We said, okay, of all the certifications achieved, which ones were most useful for you for getting a job? And which ones provided you with the knowledge, skills, and abilities you actually need as a cybersecurity professional? Now, as you can see and probably guess on our conclusions, there's one that stands out, and that's a CISSP, which is a general security certification, covers a wide area of topics, and really does provide a very good foundation for people. After that, though, it seems like it tails off a lot. It doesn't seem like it does. And so what you have after the CISSP is specialization. So I want to make it clear, I'm not suggesting for a minute that certifications aren't useful. They can be useful, but they're useful in specialized areas. They're useful for esoteric areas of security, and they're useful when a security professional wants to at least get a baseline of knowledge in a particularly new area to him or her. But the important thing to me to take away is that certifications are limited, and people get more out of hands-on training, mentoring, networking with others in a security professional organization. And so as you're planning your career, as you're thinking about improving your salability, consider those things, because I think there is a transition where employers are looking at experience, they're looking at real-world experience. Certifications are, to some extent, window dressing. They can be good window dressing, and I know I'm going to get grief for using that term, but they have a role, and the role is somewhat limited. And Candy, I know you have strong opinions on this.
Right. So I was really very surprised about the results on this question. But I think that being said, it clearly demonstrates that there is a fragmentation in the certification market, clearly. So I think the other thing is that it's really important to understand that the original purpose of certifications were addressed with the CISSP. That was the first and, the gold standard, truly. As of March, there are 105, over 105,000 CISSPs around the world. So clearly that is the gold standard. But I think, again, I'd like to remind all of us that the reason certifications came about was it was an easy means for us to be able to demonstrate to others that we have a baseline of knowledge. So I think that that's the important thing. And of course, with the CISSP, that means that we're able to demonstrate a baseline of knowledge in the common bodies of knowledge. So there's a grounding, a demonstration to folks, especially non-security folks, that we more or less are well, prepared for, that type of job, if you will. So I think that that's the important thing to understand is, the purpose. And I think that over time that purpose has kind of gotten diluted in that now it's, a contest to see who can have the most letters after your name. But I think that this really demonstrates that, think before you spend. And, training dollars are hard to come by nowadays, as well as mind share. We just don't have the time to go out and, go after many of these certifications. So, it does speak to go after what's important. And, CSSP and all of the certifications are very important, but go to what's important for you as an individual. And that might not necessarily mean additional certifications. So.
Right. And Candy, you made a great point on our last webinar where you said sometimes certifications are sort of a cool thing to have within the professional community. It's like bragging rights between us.
Right.
But it's funny that even if it's bragging rights, the very same people are saying, well, only the CISSP is the one that stands out.
Exactly. I mean, when you look at all of these letters after individuals' names, the only one that makes a difference is CISSP. ISC Squared has been working for 22 years to make that the gold standard. Non-information security people understand that. The business people understand that. As for the rest of these, we're only impressing each other as to, like with some of these certifications, and half of them I have to go look up, and I've been doing information security for 30 years. So I think, again, we need to be really careful when we start looking at what are our needs and where we're going to spend our training dollars.
I agree. It makes a decision for security professionals as well as their employers as to what they'll support and what they won't. So if we go on to the next slide. So we wanted to know if cybersecurity professionals are happy with their career choice, and if so, what makes them happy? Now, most cybersecurity professionals are very enthusiastic, but this was really related not to the overall choice of being a cybersecurity professional, but specific to the jobs that they have, because those vary. Now, before I go into this data, I should also point out that 41% of the people we surveyed said they were very satisfied at their current job. That was disappointing and disheartening because that means that 59% are only somewhat satisfied, not very satisfied, or not at all satisfied in their jobs. And thus, there's a pretty fluid market for people coming and going from different security jobs. So what determines their satisfaction once they're in these jobs? Well, 32% said competitive or industry-leading financial compensation. It's a little blurry there, so let me read it. Now, we talked about before that money isn't necessarily a motivating factor for getting into this industry, but once you're there, you want competitive salaries with the people that are in similar organizations with similar positions. Now, that's not unusual. In fact, I do a lot of research, and I can tell you that it's very, very common that that money comes out on top. But beyond that, what we see is 24% talked about a general organizational culture that supports strong cybersecurity. So this goes beyond the cybersecurity team. It includes the business people, it includes HR, it includes legal, it includes everyone pulling together in cybersecurity. 23% said business management's commitment to cybersecurity. So they want to see leadership from the CEO, leadership from the board on cybersecurity issues. And then we had 22% coming in saying the organization provides support and financial incentives, enabling cybersecurity staff to participate in training and development. So people want the ability to improve their careers. And 22% said the organization provides opportunities for career advancement and promotion. So to summarize, it's really about cybersecurity going beyond just this technical cat and mouse game, but it's part of the culture, it's part of the business, it's part of the organization, and the organization supports this by giving the cybersecurity staff the right training, the right tools, the right mentoring, and the right opportunities for their career development. So it's a pretty holistic package. Kenny, what do you think?
So I think this really speaks to the fact that ultimately, whether you're in information security or you're an accountant or whatever, no matter what, you want to feel valued by the organization. You want to feel appreciated. And so I think that when we look at it holistically, all of this data on this slide speaks to the fact that I just want to feel appreciated. But when you look closely at the other points being, a supportive culture and commitment to security, that comes down to me saying that the businesses, if the business understood what it is we do, then that would be important. I would want to stay. If I have as much passion and commitment into my job, then I would hope that the company would have as much commitment to providing me the tools and opportunities necessary to do my job. So it kind of even goes back to what we said previously, that information security people just want to save the world. We just want to save the company. We just want to protect it. And we just want to have the budget, resources, and training to get that accomplished.
I agree. And in the report, there's an alternative slide presenting the factors determining where people are unsatisfied with their job. And you can imagine that it's the polar opposite of this. And that, so given the market right now, cybersecurity professionals aren't patient. When they do see organizations that don't support these things, they tend to leave. So if you go on to the next slide, please. This is one of the red flags that came out of this research project. So the question we asked is, in your opinion, does your current employer provide the cybersecurity team with the right level of training in order for them to keep up with business and IT risk? 44% said yes. The organization does provide the support and financial incentives, enabling the staff to keep up with cybersecurity risks. But again, so 56% said my organization should provide more training and to keep up with business and IT risk. And 24% said no, my organization should provide significantly more training so that the cybersecurity team can keep up with business and IT risk. Now, I've talked a lot about this research with the press and with a lot of other cybersecurity professionals, a lot of thought leaders. And I've used the term that this presents an existential risk. And I absolutely realize the risk of using that term. It sounds like hype. But if we think about this, we don't have enough people in the cybersecurity field. Those people that are working in the cybersecurity field are often just completely overworked because they're taking on the job responsibility of a lack of total staff. And then those people who are on the front lines trying to defend our IT assets and business assets aren't being provided with enough training. So there's a force multiplying effect here that says we're understaffed and we're underskilled and we're not keeping up with those skills. That to me is a tremendous red flag and one of the really important conclusions of this research. And Candy, I know you feel the same way.
Absolutely, and it just clearly points back to those in our audience that are familiar in working with the security frameworks, whether it be NIST or whether it be ISO or whatever. This really is called out as one of the assessment points when you go to do a risk assessment with an organization. Are there enough resources and or are your staff provide enough training or networking opportunities? And if it not, this does introduce a significant risk to the organization. So I think that it's important to as well understand from this data being presented that it clearly shows that we're in that firefighting mode, we're in that reactive mode, and that happens with both IT as well as information security. So we need to get smart and think about how to slowly turn that tide so we become more proactive as opposed to reactive in our jobs. And this, again, comes back down to the challenge I mentioned before, that as technologists, we're challenged with keeping up with technology and learning about the technology. But now it's compounded by being an information security professional, where not only do you need to learn about the technology, but you need to learn about the vulnerabilities in the use of the technology. So you have to go one step further and getting, to know that piece of technology and its uses and whatnot. So that, again, introduces a compounded challenge that even IT folks don't necessarily have. I think the other thing to point out here is that, when we look at cost savings within organizations, the first thing to be cut is the training budget. So I think that, we need to recognize that when businesses go to try and tighten the purse strings, that perhaps they not tighten the training budgets when it comes to technology and information or cybersecurity. That by doing that provides an even bigger vulnerability window, if you will.
Yeah, and Candy, this situation is well recognized in the medical field, for example, where you become a physician and it's understood that part of what you need to do moving forward is keep up with all of the latest research. And we need to have that mindset with cybersecurity as well.
Well, the thing is, John, that it kind of ties back now to the certifications. All the certifications mandate that you have continuing education credits. So, I think a lot of people go after the easy to obtain CPEs, but I think, we need to use that leverage point of the continuing education credits. We need to use that leverage point back to the business and say, listen, just as doctors and physicians and healthcare industry are mandated to keep up with technology, we as technologists need to do the same thing. It's that significant of a risk if we don't do that. Just as you could lose a patient in the medical field because you don't understand the latest techniques and technologies, we could lose parts of our business if we don't keep up the latest technologies and tools and techniques to keep that breathing as well.
I completely agree. Go on to the next slide, and there's only a couple more slides left. So, as we know, as cybersecurity professionals, cybersecurity is a team sport. And we actually saw that in some of the research where people talked about job satisfaction being related to the business's commitment and a culture of cybersecurity. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work out in terms of the working relationships. In this case, we wanted to look at the working relationship between the cybersecurity team, the IT team, and primarily, I guess, IT ops or network ops, and the business teams. And what this data says, I'll summarize, is that 20% of those cybersecurity professionals that we surveyed said that the relationship between the cybersecurity team and the IT team is only fair, they'd only rate it fair or poor. And 27% said that they would rank the working relationship between the cybersecurity team and the business team as fair or poor. Now, these are complete red flags again. Clearly, if we'd done this research a few years ago, those numbers would have been higher. So we are moving in the right direction. But given the state of cybersecurity today, given the breaches we've seen and the attacks we know we're under, these relationships have to improve. And this, again, starts at the top: CEO, CIO, CISO, board of directors. We've operated sometimes, and we still operate in a legacy world where there are strong lines of distinction between groups and different compensation models and different objectives. We have to knock down those pillars to do a better job on security. Now, strong leaders do knock down those pillars. If you do have a culture of security, you do consider security in these areas. And security, in many cases, and we see this in a trend where CISOs are no longer reporting to CIOs, where there's a kind of inherent conflict of interest, and they're reporting in somewhere else, even to a CEO. But that's the direction we need to move in. And this, to me, this data really represents an unacceptable situation. Candy?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree anymore. And to me, that whole reporting structure isn't happening fast enough. I get to work with a lot of businesses across many industries, and unfortunately, if they have a security person, it reports into the CIO, and if they don't have a security individual, it falls within IT. So I think this is clearly demonstrating the confusion in regards to the role of information security. And that confusion may be caused by us as a profession not being really sure and having a clear, consistent message throughout all of us. Or it could just be, the fact that we're not articulating clearly enough what our role is. So I think, when we look at our role within an organization, we need to really position ourselves as that person that works with IT to reduce the risk. We work with the business to understand what the risks are. So we work with the business to understand how the business operates, what are the goals and objectives of the business, take that information, understand what risks may be introduced, and then feed that back over to the IT side of the house. So I don't think that there's been enough of that type of collaboration between all of the entities, and that oftentimes, for whatever reason, security gets suppressed into the IT department or other. So I think we have a long way to go here. And I think, again, the onus is on us as information security folks to positively educate the business as to what our job is.
I couldn't agree more. Go on to the next slide. This is our final data slide, and then we'll wrap up. And this is the one that's getting most of the press, and you'll understand why in a second. Now, I started by saying that in our earlier ESG research from this year, 46% of organizations say that they have a problematic shortage of cybersecurity skills today. And there's a lot of other research along those lines. Coincidentally, if you look at this research and add up the three bars on the far left, 46% of the cybersecurity professionals we surveyed say that they are solicited to consider other cybersecurity jobs by recruiters at least once a week. That's a state of our industry today and our profession today, is that not only is there's an acute skills shortage, there's salary inflation, and because there's an acute skills shortage, the only way you can fill these jobs is to poach people from other organizations. So that's created a seller's market. That's created, great opportunities for cybersecurity professionals. But What's the backside of this? Well, it's massive attrition. It's your embedded processes and skill sets walking out the door, and security is really a manual, process-driven, in many cases, type of skill set. So if the person who's your ace at incident response walks out the door, you're in trouble. And it just creates a lot of instability and a lot of problems for all organizations. So again, I point to this existential problem that we have, existential risk. This is part of it, is that it's good news for people who are in this profession, who are professionals, but it's really bad news for the organizations that hire them. And therefore, organizations really do need to put more time and effort into thinking about how to build a center of excellence that attracts cybersecurity professionals, where they can hire them, grow them, retain them. Otherwise, you're in a lot of trouble. You're going to see people walking out the door, and when that happens, you really have to go for unattractive alternatives and different strategies. Candy?
I found this to be really interesting, and I think, again, it's one of those things that it's a tale-telling sign of underlying issues, right? So it goes back to making sure that you have that employee satisfaction when it comes to the information security professional. Again, people just want to feel valued, supported, and understood. It goes back to an earlier data point that we talked about. I think as well as that this also speaks to the fact that as information security professional employees, we don't feel that we're getting enough by way of support, training, mentorship. So those areas need to be also focused on to retain those employees. I think the other thing that I'd like to say about this set of data is that as information security folks, we need to be really careful when we start playing the game of musical chairs. You know, the old saying that you'd be jumping from the frying pan into the fire just seems to, ring in my ears, that oftentimes, we aren't happy with the situation or the job that we're in. So, we're going to, pack up our bags, take our ball, and go to another playing field. I think we need to be careful about that, and I think as well really explore these conversations with your manager and or the HR. If you have to use some of this data, use some of this messaging, and again, the onus is also on you that you need to provide some education to management in the business and HR as to what your job is, that you're not just, under IT, that you do bring value in identifying risk to the organization. So I think, we need to be really careful about what we do in regards to jumping ship, if you will.
Thanks, Candy. So if you go on to the next slide, I want to leave some time for Q&A, so I'll try to go through this quickly. So first of all, these conclusions are some of my conclusions. The actual report is 66 pages long, so that there's a lot of great data, a lot of conclusions in there. But specific to what we talked about today, so cybersecurity professionals are feeling positive and negative results. The positive results are it's a seller's market. There are opportunities, there are more jobs than people, so you can be selective. But the negative results is if you are dedicated to your organization and you see some of your peers walking out the door and now you're understaffed and you lost some critical skills, that's going to impact you. And so we need to do a better job as a professional community. Most cybersecurity professionals are not managing their careers well, and we talked about that, and I think Candy can really articulate some of the things that ISSA is doing to help move that forward, but it is a community effort, and it's an international community effort. The relationships between cybersecurity people, business, and IT groups are a work in progress. We need to make more progress there, and this really does come from leadership beyond the CISO or the security leaders. We need, and we've seen a steady movement, but it doesn't go far enough, and there are organizations who still don't believe that they're vulnerable to an attack, which is just crazy at this point. We know that security professionals have clear perspectives on what makes or breaks employment, and we talked about those, and they're pretty straightforward, but they're important for CISOs and organizations at large to assess whether they're meeting those types of criteria and improve them where they can. We didn't talk about CISO, so I'm going to skip that, but there is great research in the CISO about CISOs, their profession, what makes them successful, why they move on in the report. And as I mentioned, the security job market represents an existential threat. We know we have a shortage of people, but now we know from our research that the people that we have are not trained as well as they could be, not working as well as they could with IT and business professionals. And what didn't come out in this presentation but came out strongly in the research is that they're burnt out, and that's a bad thing. And then I put in a plug. Stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about cybersecurity professionals' impressions on the threat landscape, on risks, on their organization, and on cybersecurity on society as a whole, because we're the people who live this every day, so we have strong opinions. So, Candy, I know you have some conclusions to wrap up as well.
Yes. Next slide, please. So from ISSA's perspective, the conclusions that I'd like to offer are that formal education establishes a foundation of learning, but it's really important to think about, as technologists, we need to keep up with that technology as it comes out. So what we call the just-in-time learning solutions are where a lot of us are going to find value. And when I talk about just-in-time learning solutions, that could be anything from a YouTube video to other offerings such as Cybrary, such as Mind's Edge. There's a few of them that would offer that just-in-time learning solution. Another offer of consideration would be that certifications are just as they intended. To remember that it's a means to identify your baseline knowledge. So be careful when you go and start going after the alphabets that go behind your name. Make sure that it's based on your specific need. If you're going to do pen testing, then ethical hacker does make sense. However, perhaps, like the certification for software development isn't. So again, just be really cognizant and spend your training dollars wisely. Also, remember that networking and peer mentoring are really important parts of your career development. I look back at my career of nearly 30 years, and I would most certainly say that it was because of some really great mentors that I had that I've been able to make it this far and this long. So it's really important to stay engaged, and it doesn't have to be just ISSA. I think the important thing to realize as well that any agnostic organization would be good. And what I mean by agnostic is not just pushing for certifications or pushing for certain technology or tools, but look at other organizations like IEEE, look at the Cloud Security Alliance, look at OWASP, and so on and so forth. There's some really great organizations out there that would help provide you that knowledge base and that networking opportunity. And that, last but not least, technology is not the only subject to be knowledgeable in. It's really important to start thinking about your business acumen, to go in and understand business principles, what makes the business move forward, and then to add in your security knowledge on top of that. So again, don't stop at technology or information security principles and practices, but get in there and start learning about the business, learning about communication skills, writing, and so on and so forth. Those are the really important factors. Slide.
Candy, I see a few questions here. I know we're just about done.
Sure, let's take them. So let me see. I think we had one. Based on your thoughts earlier on certifications to break into the security industry? Is it better to focus on a degree instead? So I think I'll take that first. I think, again, looking at taking the principle of having the foundational education is important. So go after your degree first. Get that as your foundation, and then go after the specialty trainings, whether it be certification or it be some very specific technology training. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'd say look if you can, if you live in the right area, look for a degree from one of the universities that's been classified as a center of excellence. I'm in the Boston area, and I know Northeastern is one of them. And I'd also look for degree programs that have a heavy emphasis or at least support some type of internship. So you do get the hands-on experience as well. It's certainly a great stepping stone, but I think those things will add to the degree program and the value.
Great. So here's one that's rather related to what you just mentioned. How do I show my skills and value to a potential employer if I don't have much work experience? You want to take that?
Sure. So part of what you should show is your interest, because there are particular areas of cybersecurity, for instance, forensics, analytics, incident responders, where there is a tremendous shortage. So if you're interested in that area, go out, do some reading, do some studying on your own, talk to people. So get involved in organizations like ISSA where you can network with similar people, and then make sure that you're communicating some of your interests as well as your experience, because what we're seeing now because of the skill shortage is that a lot of companies are willing to bring on people with less skills but who are dedicated to improving their skills, and they're willing to invest in them. So that probably means casting a wide net. That may mean moving, depending on your situation. But if you have that enthusiasm, if you talk about what you're interested in and what you're trying to do to pursue those interests, I think that will be helpful.
Yeah, great points. I think I would also add to that, you had mentioned internships. So if you are in a degree program, really look to solicit how you might get involved with something like that. I know a lot of organizations are starting to look at that more closely and offer more internships. So that's a great way as well to get your feet wet, if you will. I think another suggestion that I had heard in my past is, doing volunteerism. Volunteer at different organizations to assist them with doing awareness of information security or help them from a cybersecurity perspective. So I think that those are a couple of other great options. I think as well, just generally speaking, how can you not be interested in somebody who is not passionate? I mean, if you have the passion, it shines through. So whether you have experience or not, that's an important factor as a hiring manager. I want to look at those folks that are driven to do this as a profession. So even though you might not have the hands-on experience, keep going after that knowledge, attaining that knowledge, and start listing that as additional forms on your resume. So I think we might have time for one last one, and this is a real specific question. Are there any opinions about ISRM, Information Security and Risk Management Certificate? So let's just broaden that a little bit for certificate programs. We talked about certification, but what are your thoughts, John, about certificate programs by universities?
I think it really does fit in with what we talked about before, that the certificate programs are additive and good as a baseline for specific areas of security. So, and you mentioned one that I've mentioned quite a bit, is if you're interested in becoming a penetration tester, then going after your certified ethical hacking certification makes a lot of sense. I will say that a lot of what I've noticed in the past couple of years is that universities understand that there's a demand for cybersecurity. Many universities are for-profit entities, so they're increasing their courses in cybersecurity. So caveat emptor, really do your research. Make sure that you understand what the placement opportunities are, what the success of those placement opportunities are. Network with people who've gone through those certification programs at universities. Those will all be helpful in judging your success.
Excellent. Well, I think that is it. That's all we have time for. So next slide, Leah, and we can let people know where the reports are. So, John?
Yeah, thanks again. Again, please download the report, read it, give us your feedback. We want to make it better. Send it out because one of our goals here is for people to be aware of the voice of the cybersecurity professional. So please send it out to all your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from it. Here's a couple places you can download it today, and then stay tuned. You'll see sometime in the November timeframe the part two of the series of reports.
Great. Thank you very much, John. It's been fun as always. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Leah for our housekeeping and closure.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Candy, for being here today and presenting this information to our members. If you have any questions or would like a copy of the presentation, it will be emailed out tomorrow, 24 hours after the live presentation. We will also include a survey for your feedback. We're looking to expand our meetups for the pre-professionals as well as other levels of the cybersecurity career lifecycle. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. The survey will be emailed to you tomorrow. Thank you for your time and participation. We hope to see you at the ISSA International Conference, November 2nd through 3rd in Dallas, Texas. And Candy and John will also be doing the same topic and going into a little more detail on the survey results. Thank you for your participation. Hope you have a great day.